Shruti, please make it full screen.
Hello. Sir, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Your
We can
presentation.
see your presentation.
My, just 1 second, sir.
No, that just at the bottom you have that, no? Yeah. Like a that one, yes, that one. That is.
Got it? Sir, can you see my?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can.
Okay. Good evening, sir. I am presenting a case of an 18-year-old boy. He is a student, right-handed, from Bangalore. He came with a complaints of inability to move his left upper limb and loss of sensation in his left hand since 6 months. He gives a history of a road traffic accident in February when he fell bike and suffered a closed injury to his shoulder. His left shoulder was depressed and his neck hyperextended laterally. After the injury, he was unable to move his left shoulder and left elbow. He had a loss of sensation over the left thumb and index fingers. He did not complain of any intolerable pain. He had no other injuries. He did not sustain any head injury, any other fractures, any vascular injury. He had no open wounds or deformities. He was managed conservatively and he had no improvement in function or sensation since the injury. His personal history, he has no addictions, he has no comorbidities, and no relevant past medical or surgical history. He does not give any history of surgical intervention, and he gives a history of physiotherapy for the last 4 months for his left upper limb, where he was advised home exercises, that is, passive movements of the joints. This is a video. Yes.
Is it on QuickTime?
Okay, but does it work?
So he is trying to abduct his shoulder, but
Not
he
able
is
to do it.
not able to, and his elbow remains extended and forearm pronated. So on general examination, his general and systemic examination is within normal limits. His local examination, the attitude of his left upper limb is a flail limb with shoulder adducted, elbow extended, and forearm pronated. And on inspection, he showed no signs of Horner syndrome. There was no wasting of paraspinal muscles. From the picture, we can see a little bit of shoulder asymmetry. The wasting of muscles is seen on the left side, supraspinatus, infraspinatus, deltoid, biceps, and clavicular part of the pectoralis major. Left side is a positive sulcus sign. There is no winging of scapula, no scars or deformities, and the opposite limb is normal. We can see that he's able to make a fist and even extend the wrist. So on motor examination, his trapezius is acting, grade 5. Rhomboids are acting. Latissimus dorsi is acting. Shoulder abduction, forward flexion, and elbow flexion are grade 0. Elbow extension is 5. Pronation 5. Supination 0. Wrist flexion and extension were grade 5. Finger flexion, extension, and intrinsic movements are grade 5.
Can you do that again? Can you do that again? Yeah.
Yes, sir. So his motor examination from the trapezius was acting, so he was able to shrug the shoulder.
I'll just read it. I'll just read it. It's okay.
Yes.
Okay, done.
Yes. Tinel sign is present in the supraclavicular region near the posterior border of the sternocleidomastoid. Sensory examination, there was a loss of sensation over the lateral arm and the lateral part of the forearm, and decreased sensation in the left thumb and index fingers. His peripheral pulses are normal. Coming to my diagnosis, it is a post-traumatic left brachial plexus palsy with C5, C6 involvement of 6 months duration, not showing encephalopathy.
Okay. Yeah. So this is done as far as the diagnosis is concerned.
Yes, sir.
Let's go back. Let's go back.
Okay. Okay.
Go to the beginning. Yeah. Somewhere behind that. Even before that. Go back. Yeah. No, the next one. Unable to move the left shoulder. Seldom is it that they say, I can't move my left shoulder unless they've got a coincidental shoulder skeletal injury. They are unable to lift the left shoulder.
Okay. Yes.
And, you know, when you say move the left elbow, instead if you say bend the elbow, that's
Yes.
quite better. That's what he is not able to do. He can't bend his elbow, right?
Yes. Yes, sir. Correct.
Yeah. The loss of sensation of thumb and index finger, did he specify? Or he just said
No,
that
actually,
my hand sensation is not normal?
is different. Yes, sir. He said it is
Yeah.
different and a bit decreased towards the thumb and index.
I have not really been able to understand when you have a pure upper brachial plexus injury, your logic states that since C5, C6 is gone, the lateral root of median is gone. So
Yes.
obviously, you're not going to have sensation in the thumb tip and at least the index tip. But
Yes, sir.
it is never the kind of sensory loss that a patient with a median nerve complains, right? So
Yes, sir.
we would really excuse you if you said that the patient says that he has decreased sensation in the radial aspect of the left hand, instead of, you know, just trying to specify the left thumb in the index. Okay, you said no intolerable pain, no other injuries, and it, okay, fine. Next slide.
Yes.
Okay. Next. Next. Yeah, here, all plexus injuries, a video is fine. Make it a practice of taking a photo from the back.
Yes.
From the front, you just get to see the curve of the deltoid. Beyond that, you don't see anything. Or
Yes,
at the
sir.
most, if the patient has got a drooping shoulder. Tell me
Yes.
something.
Yes, sir.
How would you know, just by looking at a photograph, this photograph, say that his trapezius is normal? Can you remark?
Not exactly, sir. Except for if his head is also neutral position.
No, right. Just remember this. When a patient has got no abductors for the shoulder, sometimes they compensate by keeping that ipsilateral injured shoulder at a higher level than the opposite side. You get my
Okay.
point? He knows that his
Yes, sir.
shoulder is drooping. Somehow
Ah.
the trapezius seems to work to pull it up. That can be made out by, you know, the curve of the neck with the head.
Yes, sir.
And in fact,
Oh.
some of them say that they constantly complain that they have a sore neck.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes this sore neck may also be because of a lot of hematoma and fibrous reaction, which is probably causing some sort of a, you know, compression on the residual nerves. They complain of pain. There may be a swelling that also may be there. This is just an extension to the clinical examination. It's not exactly important, except for the fact that the ipsilateral injured shoulder may be lifted up more than the opposite side.
Oh.
Next. Yeah, no. I forgot. You don't write flail limb there. A flail limb always implies a panplexus injury. It's not a flail limb.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
Okay. You also made a point that I think it's the next one. Is there a photograph after this? No sign of honors. No sign of. Okay. Go back. No wasting of paraspinal muscles.
Yes.
Can you rely on your clinical examination to tell you when the patient has got a normal trapezius, whether the paraspinal muscles are innervated or not innervated?
No, sir, not unless we do a
Hmm.
electrodiagnostic.
Have you ever heard of a book called Pathways in Surgical Management by Michael Hopsley? Not heard. We had it, during our MS general surgery days. That fellow says, don't drag clinical examination to the, keep
That's
on
right.
dragging it that it, ends up by looking silly. I'll draw you a parallel.
Okay.
We were taught to believe that when you have a diagnosis of inguinal hernia, you should be able to say whether it's omentum or gut. If it is gut, small gut or large gut, it doesn't make any difference. So similarly, in this case, you cannot really make out wasting of paraspinal muscles. Just
Okay.
stop it at the trapezius, and you are able to determine that the patient has got a winging of the scapula. That has got an importance.
Okay.
Why does it have an importance, winging of scapula?
Uh, because serratus anterior is supplied by C5, 6, and 7. If there is a winging of scapula, we would expect a injury to C5, 6, and 7 also in extent.
This is anyway a C5-6 injury.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? How does it change your management? If a patient has got a plexus patient like this,
Like
has
it
got,
is not, injury is not at the root level, not preganglionic, probably postganglionic.
if there is winging of scapula.
No, if there is
Correct.
no winging of scapula.
Okay, I get your point. So if there is winging of scapula, there is a high probability that it's a preganglionic lesion.
Preganglionic, yeah.
Put it always high probability. What are the clues that the patient may have a preganglionic lesion? Winging of scapula is one. Okay.
Yes.
The other one you already pointed out, the patient has got a TINELS. So again, a
Yes.
TINELS implies that it's probably a postganglionic lesion.
Postganglionic.
These are not very fixed rules. Now the serratus anterior gets three roots, three
Yes.
branches from 5, 6, and 7.
Yes.
So it just only, but those branches arise obviously outside the intervertebral foramen. But if they are injured, then the likelihood of it being a preganglionic lesion is
Is
extremely
more.
high. Okay. How do you test for the serratus anterior?
We ask him to push the wall or an immovable object with.
It's very difficult here. In a patient who
Yeah.
can't move his shoulder, you
Yeah.
have to assist him. You have to hold the limb. You have to stand by the side
Yes.
of the patient. You have to put a hand across near the inferior angle of the scapula. And then you have to inspect
Okay.
also the hip from behind and compare it to the normal side. Otherwise, it's very
Oh.
difficult to. In a panplexus, it's next to impossible. But at least in a partial
Oh.
plexus, you have scope, provided you know what to look for. It's not very easy. He can't really push. Maybe his hand is
Yes.
working, but his shoulder and elbow are not working. He can't. He has to
Yes.
move his limb forward, and when he moves his limb forward, you get the inferior angle of the scapula and that area, right? Okay.
Okay.
What is that positive sulcus sign?
Positive sulcus sign is when the shoulder is not stable. We find a intraglenoid, just the humerus slips down a little. We can see a gap beneath the acromion.
How long is the duration of this thing?
6 months.
I cannot see from this kind of a picture. I cannot see. He doesn't have. Okay. So when you mention it, sulcus sign means it's basically that acromion and the head of the humerus. There
Yes.
will be something like a gap in between.
Gap in.
I think that's what you're referring to.
Yes, sir.
So it's more noticed in panplexus injuries. It can happen in partial plexus also, where there's a severe degree of atrophy and no therapy or no splintage has been given to. Okay.
Okay.
Right. Next. Go back to that. No, the wrist.
Yes.
I saw. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
What did you see here?
He is able to make a fist. His wrist is also he's able to extend the wrist.
Okay. You know, when you start doing more of plexus injuries, you will realize that there is a fine gradation between a C5-6 injury and a C5-6-7 injury. Injuries don't come like you see them in textbooks. The reason why I'm asking is when he does that wrist extension, note it whether the wrist is going to radial deviation or it's in neutral position.
Oh,
Right?
okay. Yes,
It
sir.
makes it a good practice to see it that way. If it goes into radial deviation, that means the ECU is not working. And the ECU is supplied by C7. So
Okay.
C7 or C8. So you would know that what you assume to be a pure 5-6 has also got a partial injury to C7 and C8, which
Oh,
changes your treatment protocol different.
yes, sir.
Okay? Right.
Yes.
Now, that supination is 0.
Yes, sir.
What about the supinator? It's not working.
Uh, he was unable to supinate even in extension.
Yeah.
His elbow is anyway extended.
And in and in flexion, suppose you would have kept his elbow into flexion, he could pronate. Would he supinate?
Uh,
Suppose you put his elbow flexed and onto a desk,
okay.
would he be able to supinate?
No, sir.
He would
Since his
not be able to.
biceps is not acting.
Mm. Okay. Next. Okay. Don't say peripheral pulse, you say radial artery and ulnar artery are normal.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Right. You have
Yes.
done what you have to do as per the clinical examination. Continue.
Yes, sir. I would like to investigate with chest X-ray in both inspiration and expiration to look for the diaphragm level
Yeah.
on both domes. And I would like to do an MRI.
Now you want to see the domes of the diaphragm. The left side is injured.
Yes.
Suppose it's it's an avulsion. What do you expect with the dome of the diaphragm?
Avulsion, if it is involving the proximal, the nerve injury also, there is a possibility that there will be an elevated left dome.
Elevated left dome, meaning it will become similar to the right side. Normally, the right side is higher.
Yes, sir, slightly.
So it will probably
Yes,
go
sir.
to the same level. The best method is don't do an X-ray, just do a fluoroscopy.
Okay.
Fluoroscopy will tell you about the movement of the diaphragm, hemidiaphragm.
Oh, okay.
So, right.
Then, and I would like to also do an MRI.
Any other reason why you would do an X-ray just other than knowing this chronic nerve stuff?
To look for any evidence of fractures in the ribs, any fracture.
Why are they important?
If we want to know that intercostal nerves are available for any.
Yeah, good. Yeah. So it's practically routine practice to get. Sometimes rib fractures may be missed.
Yes, sir.
Not all patients get an ICD or have
Mm.
something to complain or intervene. Next.
Yes, sir. Then I would like to do a nerve conduction study.
Mhm.
Uh,
Does it come
ideally,
before an MRI or after an MRI?
after an MRI.
No, it usually comes before an MRI.
Okay.
Okay. You step
Yes.
up the investigations.
Uh,
So you do a nerve conduction study. What will it tell you?
It will give me the sensory nerve action potentials and the motor action potentials.
What does it tell you?
Uh,
Can it differentiate between an
it-
avulsion and a rupture?
So yeah, if there's an avulsion, we might get an intact snap, sir, as in the sensory nerve action potential, because the dorsal root ganglion would still be intact.
Absolutely correct. But qualify your statement.
Um,
Snap in the
no-
presence of no sensation
yes, sir.
is
Clinically, yes,
diagnostic of
sir.
an avulsion.
Anesthetic arm with.
Yeah. So snap, a positive snap in the
With,
absence of sensation
yes.
is diagnostic of an avulsion. That is
Yes.
one. Right.
Yes.
How else does it help you?
The motor action potentials we'll be
Sorry,
able
go
to
back.
see.
You said something about examination of the paraspinal muscles.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so
It would
you
tell
check for
us.
whether there is denervation of rhomboids.
Yes.
Okay.
If
What is what
that
would say,
that would
suppose
tell us if it's a preganglionic
okay.
root
So
level.
you send your patient for an ENMG because you need to know something better than what you have clinically determined.
Yes.
So what is your expectation when you send to the neurologist? What would you like to know?
The amplitude of.
Not in this case. In this case, your diagnosis is straightforward. 5-6 is injured, right?
Yeah.
So the only reason why you would refer this patient is to know whether can they tell you with a guarantee whether there is an avulsion or not.
Okay.
Which I'm pretty sure they won't be able to tell you.
Okay.
Right. So that is the bottom line. A neurologist cannot say with certainty whether the injury is an avulsion or a rupture unless they do what is it called? An extension of the ENMG. There is a special technique by which you can determine avulsion.
Not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Someone can message it also. SSEP, somatosensory evoked potential.
Okay.
If that can be done, that can tell you with certainty. It's not available in most places. Okay, so that's it. And having done that, then you walk over to an MRI or an MR neurogram. What's the difference?
MR neurogram would give us we'll be able to see even the rootlets of the brachial plexus.
No, it's very simple. When you do something with a 3 Tesla machine, you
3
practically get what is called a MR neurogram, rather than a conventional MRI with lower Tesla machines.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Just remember, nowadays they've started using also ultrasound for brachial plexus.
Okay.
It requires a lot of practice. So they start, from peripheral nerve injuries to proximal lesions to the plexus. Obviously, it is going to be cheaper, but it is observer dependent. So you have a right next.
Professor Srikanth?
Yeah.
Good evening. This is Dr. Radhakrishnan.
Yeah, tell me.
I just wanted to, just a small addition only.
Please.
Nowadays, we do ultrasound, high resolution ultrasound at Stanley Hospital. Like what we do is initially, the first 1 month, immediately after the injury, the MRI may not be much contributory. So what we try, because there will be a lot of edema and other things. So in those situations, probably the ultrasound we are doing, in the sense that the edema would be, much edema would be there, wherein it is futile to attempt a MRI. So better.
True. I do not at all disagree. In fact, the thing is, when you do a clinical examination followed up an ENMG, it is much simpler to get an HRUS done before jumping into an MRI, without a doubt.
Yeah. So that way we use it in the gap period.
Yeah, people who do your HRUS should be told what to expect and how to interpret.
Yes.
That's true.
Yeah, observer variation is definitely there. Observer variation is
correct.
Definitely.
Correct. Sure.
Thank you.
Next. So your reconstructive goals.
Yes, sir. So
let me just ask you something. Suppose you don't have facility for MRI, you don't have facility for the ultrasound. You just done an ENMG and clinical examination. Will you operate?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. The reason is
clinically he is not recovering.
Yeah. So the point is, it's a proximal nerve injury. He's already 6 months down the line, and there is whatever investigations you do cannot be 100% certain. The proof of the pudding is in exploration. So you have put some reconstructive goals.
Yes, sir.
Restoration of shoulder abduction and external rotation, elbow flexion. See, this reconstructive goal is far more applicable to a complete plexus injury rather than saying here. If you have a panplexus injury, then you have certain prioritization. With a partial plexus injury, general assumption is, or the intention is to make him completely normal, pre-injury status. Which means, even if you give him abduction, external rotation, shoulder antipulsion, elbow flexion, everything. These are functions lost, no doubt. But then you are trying to make it normal. This will be more pertinent in case of a complete plexus injury, where you have to choose, pick and choose.
Okay.
And since you have particularly talked about the lack of sensation, you should write that also. Restoring normal sensation in the radial aspect of the hand. If you had not talked about it, I wouldn't have said. Next.
Yes. So my surgical plan would be to explore the brachial plexus. And if I find it to be a postganglionic injury, and if I find a healthy proximal stump, then I would think about reconstruction with cable grafts. And it would be to connect the C5 to the posterior division of upper trunk or the lateral cord, depending on the level of healthy distal stump available. And C6 to anterior division of the upper trunk or the posterior cord. I would additionally like to do a spinal accessory nerve to a suprascapular nerve.
Okay. I do not disagree at all with what you have said. Largely, you do a plexus exploration, meaning a formal plexus exploration.
Yes,
and depending on your findings, you need to put in cable grafts.
Yes.
Because in almost all situations, unless you have an acute open neck injury because of a knife, something like that, it's seldom, you'll be able to do a direct repair. It has to be developed.
Yes, sir.
Now, instead of saying C5 to posterior division of upper trunk, oblique lateral cord, and C6, it all depends on how many usable routes you find.
Yes, sir.
If you find the 2 usable routes, you can connect to all targets distally. If you find only 1 usable route, then you have to pick and choose.
Yes,
The
sir.
spinal axillary to suprascapular remains fixed.
Yes, sir.
If the spinal axillary is available, never assume that spinal axillary. We have seen situations in which the spinal axillary is not available. Then you have to think of an alternative. If it is available, you do that. So, a situation would arise where you have got 2 routes.
Yes, sir.
What are the distal targets? The distal targets are, once you have a 5-6 kind of an injury, the distal target will be the lateral cord.
Yes,
It will be the posterior cord. And what else? You have mentioned yes, upper trunk. Okay. So if it is at the level of the trunk, then you basically have only the upper division of the posterior division of the upper trunk and the anterior division of the upper trunk. So because the anterior division of the upper trunk would go to the lateral cord.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yes,
you should have put a diagram here. It should have been easier to figure it out. Yes. But I would probably take it this: 2 routes available. You can do a complete plexus reconstruction.
Okay.
It was pre-injury. If you have 1, you have to pick and choose. Something will be left.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And when you're talking about C5 and the C6, you may end up, depending on the nerve gap, having to use up 2 sural nerves.
Yes, sir.
Because each of it will take about 3 or 4 cables. If you're doing it right in the neck itself, that's fine. But if your distal level of injury is behind or below the clavicle, then you have to treat it differently.
Yes, sir.
Okay. As far as your exam goes, you don't really need to know more than this. What is your next one?
Sir, I have a doubt here. Suppose we have only 1 route available and we are able to give to one either shoulder abduction or the elbow flexion. The other would be a distal transfer, sir, nerve transfer. And do we take the less distance one into the...
I got your point. You have only 1 good route. Do you prioritize that to shoulder or do you prioritize that? They say now there are many ways to skin a cat. Meaning, there are different ways you can get the elbow flexor to work. You can transfer it to muscles, you can do a Oberlin kind of a procedure. The elbow flexion is the least of the problems.
Okay.
The problem is always the shoulder. If you address with only a SAN to SSN, go back to your house and tell me how many other muscles around the shoulder you are not innervating.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The shoulder anatomy and movement is extremely complex. There are prime movers, there are steerers, there are supporters. So the maximum amount of innervation that you can give to the shoulder is the best.
Okay.
So the priority would always go to the posterior cord.
Okay.
Posterior cord or the posterior division of the upper trunk.
Yes.
Because you can get your elbow flexion much quicker in a different way because things are available here.
Yes.
In fact, there was a study. You must have heard about double neurotization for the shoulders.
Yes, sir.
Meaning you do something for the spinal axillary to suprascapular and you do something
And
for the
then the
axillary.
axillary also. Tricep long head
There
too.
was an article about triple neurotization for the shoulder where they do C5 to posterior cord, they do an SAN to SSN, and they do the axilla also. Now, if you're doing the axilla, posterior cord is not supplying the axilla. You have transected the axillary nerve and have done a triceps to axillary. So the posterior cord that you are innervating is not going to ultimately flow into the SSN, or it's not going to flow into the axillary. What it's going to take care of things like, the subscapular nerves and all those things. But even that is extremely important. So that was one article which said about triple neurotization of the shoulder. Always shoulder should get the priority because there is no good alternative.
Okay.
If your elbow fails, you have got what do you have? You've done surgery for the elbow.
We have the Oberla transfers with median ulnar fascicle.
Suppose your nerve surgeries fail.
Hello.
Suppose your nerve surgery fails. What alternative do you have?
We can have a trapezius, or we can have an LD or a pectoral transfer pedicle to the elbow flexion.
In that particular order of preference?
Pectoralis or bipedical LD.
Okay. By order of preference, it would be a bipolar transfer of the LD. Okay. It could be a functioning muscle transfer using gracilis. It could be a spineless transfer. A lot of options are there. But name one good tendon transfer for the shoulder, you won't get it. Right. So you have to concentrate on the shoulder.
Okay.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Next.